Hello and welcome back to the channel. Also, Happy New Year, as this is our first video in 2022, a fact of which we are painfully aware. Very sorry there's not been more content. Things have been a little bit mad here since the turn of the year. Just starting to settle down now though, so we hope to have in far more content coming your way again soon. We've hit that 1,000 subscribers mark, which is absolutely insane. Thank you everybody who has subscribed, liked us, commented us, given us the support. It really is amazing that we've hit that milestone. Today we're doing something a little bit different with this video. Both Jay and myself were fortunate enough to attend the North Remembers fantasy event in Holmfirth here in Yorkshire this last weekend. The event itself was 5 games over 2 days, all at 3,000 points. There were 34 armies on display there. Pretty much every army other than Skaven, I think, was represented. The event was run and organised by the phenomenal Tim Richardson, who did an absolutely sterling job of organising us all around, sorting out all the games. He'd put his own spin on the scenarios, so we had various extra victory conditions and bonus points up for grabs across the different games. So I'm going to give you a run through my army, what I took, go through the games, the matchups that I had, and then some final thoughts on what this list did, what I'd change going forwards. Before I jump into the list itself, worth mentioning that this event used a comp system. So there were bonuses for taking certain units, negatives for taking certain others, or certain items, etc. The comp rating was used for your first matchup, and then it affected your overall score at the end of the event. So army with a very, very high comp of, say, -10 would have a 10-point deduction to their final score at the end, whereas one the other way that had taken perhaps less optimal choices with a positive score would get a bonus score at the end. So that was a consideration when taking this army. Starting off, it is led by the Demon Prince. Demon Prince of Nurgle, of course, level 4 wizard using Law of Nurgle. He is a big comp points sink for me. So although he is optimized, he's got Flaming Breath, Chaos Armor, the Wings, Soul Feeder, Dragonbane Gem, and his Charmed Shield. I couldn't quite get him to the 2-up armor or 1-up armor save, Sword of Striking, etc. There were extra minuses for having too many points of Nurgle, for giving him extra. He's already a -3 or 4. Didn't want him to go any further because it's quite hard to get the positives from the models I had and what I had. So that was the Demon Prince, 495 points of Nurgly goodness. Supporting him, we had my new model here, painted up specially for this event, which is my Exalted Hero, BSB. He's on a demonic mount, Mark of Tzeentch. He's got the Talisman of Endurance and the Third Eye of Tzeentch, so with the mark, that takes him to a 4-up ward, and he's re-rolling wands. Got a magic sword on him as well, 1-up armor save, 4-up ward, re-rolling wands, BSB. The demonic mount takes him up to that toughness 5 and 3 wounds, so he was a bit of a beast. We also had a sorcerer here. He was here for my scroll caddy, level 2 fire sorcerer, just a dispel scroll and an enchanted shield on him. For the core, we had a nice big block of 29 Chaos Warriors, Mark of Khorne, and Halberds. They had the Banner of Swiftness to help get them into combat sooner, and a Musician and Standard Bearer. Supporting these guys, we had another new unit for me, which is 20 Chaos Marauders. These guys have got the mark of Slanesh and Flails, light armor as well. Again, they have a champion and a standard bearer. The purpose of these guys was to be a bunker for the wizard. Reason that they're 20 is 20 was the smallest unit I could take to still get a positive for taking them, so not an optimal choice. You got a bonus to your comp score for taking a unit of at least 20 Marauders, which is why those guys are there. Finally, in the core, 5 Chaos Warhounds, no upgrades on them, just as they came. Moving on to my special choices. First of all, we have the Gore Beast Chariot. Didn't manage to get any marks on that. Would have been nice to put Nurgle, however that would have taken me over the 500 points of Nurgle, which would have been a further negative on my score. So he was just standard as he comes. And the Chimera. Usual upgrades on him are Flaming Breath and Regenerating Flesh for the lovely breath weapon and his 4-up regen save. Also had block of 6 Chaos Knights. Ensorcelled weapons on these guys. They've got a full command. No magic banner though, just as they were. Wanted to give them a mark, ideally corn, just to make them extra choppy, but they are there to help look after my demonic mount BSB. So with him being Tzeentch, these guys either had to be Tzeentch or nothing else, so they ended up being naked. I mean, points were tight. 3,000 sounds like a lot. Warriors are not a cheap army, and there's so many fun things to try and stick in it that yeah, just 6 basic knights. They're still fairly solid. Moving over to the rare, we've got the Hell Cannon. Finally got him based and sorted out. 210 points of, well, pure chaos, really. I'll mention how he performed in some of the games, but probably more of a mental threat than what he actually did in the games. But 210 points for him. And got my Juggernauts, my Skull Crushers finished at last. So we've got a unit of 4 here. Ensorcelled weapons on these guys. They also have a magic standard with the banner of Eternal Flame, giving them flaming attacks, which actually I messed up on at one point in the battles, but we'll get to that in a bit. That was 3,000 points, so it actually came in at 2,999, so 1 point under of chaos. My comp score on it was -3. Most people at the event had a positive. Game 1 was up against Jane with her beautiful Lizard Man army. We were both on a -3 comp score, which is why we got each other for the first game. This is the mission which we've actually played on the channel previously when we were trying out our armies last year. So for the first 2 turns, you can only see a certain distance. It's 4d6 times 2 for the first turn, and 4d6 times 4 for the second. So any shooting, spells, etc. has to be within that range. Lovely game, fantastic opponent to play against. It was fairly cagey to start with, partly because we couldn't really see each other, and we were both concerned about the combat prowess of our armies. Magic didn't really come into it too much, although the clutch moment of the game, as my Skull Crushers and Chaos Warriors and Chimera, I think at that point, all charged into Temple Guard and a big block of Saurus. Lizardmen managed to get off a bubbled speed of light, putting them all at weapon skill 10, initiative 10. They all swung before me, chopped down my Skull Crushers. The Chaos Warriors took a battering as well. The Skull Crushers turned and fled. They got run down. And then after that, I was fighting a big uphill battle. My Gore Beast Chariot, my Demon Prince both did what they could to try and chomp through some units, but after losing some of my heaviest hitters, I struggled really to do the damage back to the rest of the Lizardman army then. The Temple Guard had overrun into my Hell Cannon, which tied that up. And my Knights, who kept being blasted with poison blow darts, and I rolled an unnatural amount of 1s for the armor saves, were getting whittled down as well. Ultimately, lost the game due to how the point system worked on it. It was a score of 15-5 to Jane for that one. So off to a losing start, but I was always going to be up against a tougher army with the negative comp score. She played a fantastic game. It was a lovely army to play against and a brilliant introduction to tournament fantasy. Game 2 was up against none other than our own Jay, who had taken his Bretonnian army with him. The mission on this one was seize the high ground, so it's meeting engagement, but there's a hill in the middle, and there were bonus points available if you held the hill at the start of your turn from sort of turn 3 onwards. It didn't really come up in our game, in all honesty. Most of the fighting didn't happen in the centre with the hill. It happened much further around the edges of the battlefield. My Chimera was fantastic. It ran down some peasant bowmen, went into the trebuchet at the back, and then came back to start making a nuisance of itself. The real game-changing moment in that was the Demon Prince charging in to a unit of his knights with all his heroes in, who would come rampaging through the board. They failed their terror test. They fled. They were so close to the edge of the board anyway, they ran straight off the board, and with that he lost such a huge chunk of his points and his characters, which was a real shame. All that was really left after that was a big block of Grail Knights who did get into the middle, but I had Skull Crushers. I had everything pretty much to throw at them still, so they all got slaughtered. Didn't quite table him. There were some peasant bowmen that were bravely hiding in a far corner. But the game ended with quite a comprehensive victory for the Warriors of Chaos. The score was 18-2 to myself. So 2 games in, and I was 1 for 1. My third game, the final one of day 1, was against Scott, who's from Triple Crown Wargaming. They had quite a good representation across the event there. He was playing Vampire Counts. It was quite an interesting Vampire Counts army. There were 24 Hex Wraiths across 3 different units. With his Vanguard moves, he got the first turn and he was on me. I was pinned in my own deployment zone, really. All of these horrible Hex Wraiths going through and just cutting me to pieces and then running back out again, as they're wont to do. What happened, however, is I ended up charging my Wolves into the flank of a unit of Hex Wraiths. I expected to win the combat with the flank charge. I was on a 2. I couldn't do any damage to them. I thought maybe they'd kill 1. I'd win the combat by 1, lose another, and then I'm just going to hold them there to give me chance to try and get the rest of my army where I needed them to be to try and take them out. The Hex Wraiths beat me in combat. I turned and fled. And crucially for Scott, he failed his leadership test to reform and ended up trying to run me down with the Hex Wraiths. They stopped just short of my knights, who then activated their lightsabers, charged forwards, went in, and started to mop up then. He did a really good job of denying me much points with the rest of it, so my big blobs of Khorne units, the Warriors and the Juggernauts, were completely out of position on the opposite side of the board. I think between them they killed a couple of units of Direwolves and Bat Swarms. That was it. It all came down to that one failed leadership test. It still ended up quite close. The final score was 12-8. So at the end of day 1, I had 1-2, lost 1. Sunday morning, and game 4 was against Stephen and his son. They were playing Ogres. We were playing Battle for the Pass with a special rule that you could never get more than a +2 on your casting attempts, and miscasts you rolled 3d6 and your opponent got to choose which result to give you. Was certainly influential for Stephen, who miscast quite early on. His wizard lost D3 levels on his Slaughtermaster. We were a little tentative for the first couple of turns. Ultimately, Stephen got the charges off. He managed to get his big Gutstar bus with 5 characters and the Iron Guts into my Juggernauts. And then I made a mistake. I put most of my attacks into the Firebelly, trying to kill him off before he could use his breath weapon, forgetting that the Firebelly, of course, has a 2-up ward save against flaming attacks. So I put a lot of attacks into him, and then he saved them all, which was a waste. I paid the price for it. The Juggernauts were killed and run down, and the Gutstar then really became unstoppable. There were 2 Iron Blasters in the list, which were sniping for my Chimera and my Demon Prince. I managed to pass 4 regen or ward saves in the first 2 turns as they were taking shots at them. Eventually, however, the luck had to end. Game ended with a 16-4 victory to Stephen and his lad. Played really well. Great guys to play against. Really enjoyed that game. But my winning streak was over. I was 2 for 2 going in to game 5. Final game of the event was a battle line game, except there was, again, a special rule at the start where your 2 generals had to have a duel. In this, I was up against David, who was also playing Warriors of Chaos. This was the bloodiest game we had fought. I was tabled. I would like to say I took my ounce of flesh when I did it. There wasn't a huge amount of David's armies left either. We both just crashed into each other and tore huge chunks out. It was such a fun game to play. Loads of twists, both of us making some obnoxious rolls and also making some terrible ones. Played in a really good spirit. It was, fantastic game. Fantastic way to end the event. Unfortunately for me, it was a loss. Despite being tabled, as I say, I did manage to do quite a bit of damage. Ended up with a 15-5 loss. So adding up all my scores across the event, I ended up with 44 points. My comp took that down to 41. There were then points for painting, sportsmanship, etc., as you'd expect. Ultimately, I finished 26th out of 34. So 2 wins, 3 losses. I'm not bothered. It was such good fun to play a weekend of fantasy against a fantastic group of people. Beautiful armies on display. Really, really good fun. It's the first tournament that myself or Jay have been into in about 9 years, we think, for fantasy. Always a little bit apprehensive when you go to something like this, thinking, oh, it's going to be hyper competitive, it's going to be, not much fun, it's going to be too serious. Absolutely not the case. Every single person I played against was fantastic sport. Every game played brilliantly in the spirit of it. We had so much fun. So if ever you're thinking about an event, you're not sure about it, I would 100% encourage you, go along. You're going to have a fantastic time. You're going to meet a brilliant group of people. You're going to be so inspired by what you see there with some fantastic armies, beautiful conversions. So definitely give them a go. Just dive in, enjoy it.